Now, Hassan alBanna was assassinated on February 19th, 1949. This brought about a little confusion in the leadership of the Brotherhood. There was, they had a leader. His brother was part of the leadership, but there was no one of the charisma of alBanna. Sayyid Qutb was tied to the Brotherhood at this time. However, in 1948, Qutb went to America to study at a college of education, and he studied in a couple of places in America. But he was so horrified by the decadence of America that he returned in 1950 to Egypt, more passionately than ever, pursuing the ways of the Brotherhood, the teachings of the Brotherhood. He saw the Brotherhood as the only salvation from a world up to its neck in filth. Sometimes I wonder, what if he had come to the USA today? This is 1948, right? When you couldn't say damn on the radio, right? So, anyway, it's this, he knew, he had some sense in Egypt of the colonial contamination, all that, but when he was in America, he saw what he took to be the real decadence, the moral decadence, the absence of social justice, and of course, who's behind it? The Jews. Now, the Jew as the source of all evil is part of the category of the thinking, is a category in the thinking of the Brotherhood. So Qutb didn't come to that conclusion. He had that principle going with him into the United States. So in 1950, he began to emerge as an ideological leader in the Muslim Brotherhood. And soon thereafter, however, when Nasser came to power, the Brotherhood was suppressed in Egypt. Nasser, who had been in the Muslim Brotherhood, knew exactly the threat that the Brotherhood posed for his regime, which he didn't want to. Nasser was not about making Egypt into an Islamic republic. No. He was Muslim, but he's, as Uzi Rabi indicated this morning, he didn't envision Egypt as an Islamic republic. So he suppressed the Brotherhood. Qutb, wrote this text in 1950 called "Our Struggle with the Jews." It's reminiscent of Hitler's struggle, Mein Kampf. In that text, he sees the extermination of the Jews as a religious duty. Sayyid Qutb is by far the most influential jihadist ideologue in the Middle East. Everybody reads Qutb. I would say more influential than Hassan alBanna. And these are some of his statements, that jihad aims at converting all humans on the entire earth. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. How do I go back? Jihad aims at converting all humans on the entire earth. It is an expansionist militancy which aims at liberating the whole of mankind. This is in the name of freedom. This is in the name of purity. Beware of movements that promise purity. Where does the enslavement come from? It comes from the Jews. The Jews, he says, are the blackest devil and the source of the worst anti-Islamic machinations. They are the eternal enemy of Islam. They are the evil that plagues humanity as clearly shown by the protocols of the Elders of Zion. For Sayyid Qutb, jihadists in general, the protocols of the Elders of Zion would not be considered another, propaganda text or something to incite. No, it has the status of a proof text. If it's written in the protocols, it's therefore true. As you recall, those of you who were in the session this morning where I spoke, there are 3 texts invoked in the Charter of Hamas, the Charter of Allah, as proof texts. In other words, what I am saying is the case because it is written in the Quran, because it is written in the Hadith, and because it is written in the protocols of the Elders of Zion. Notice that the Jews are the eternal enemy. What does it mean? It means that there is no end to fighting the Jews, to killing the Jews, until every Jew has been eliminated. Every Jew. One Jew is enough for the contagion to continue, the contagion that comes from the Jews. The Jewish state, then, exemplifies the Jewish Satan, so that the jihadist view of the Jews does not derive from the reestablishment of the Jewish state. It's the other way around. Their view of the Jewish state derives from what they've always taught about the Jews. The Jewish state is evil not because they have settled in someone else's land. No. Everybody settles in someone else's land. All over the globe, people settle in someone else's land. I mean, if you go over the centuries. That's not the evil. The evil is not that there are people living on a land where you think they shouldn't live. It's because they're Jews living on a land where they shouldn't live. That's why, otherwise, how could it exemplify Satan? They're not just colonialists, they're not just imperialists or whatever, they are satanic, they are demonic. It's not the presence of a hegemonic power, it's the presence of a demonic evil in their midst, which has to be opposed by any means necessary. Now, by the way, Sayyid Qutb was executed on the 29th of August in 1966. While he was in prison, he wrote one of his most famous texts called Milestones, which has wide circulation. In the meantime, in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, the Brotherhood is sending people, missionaries and messengers out into the region. By the end of the 1950s, they had more than 50 centers in Sudan. And one of the most devoted adherents of the Brotherhood in Sudan was Hassan al-Turabi. As of 1977, al-Turabi was the leader of the Brotherhood in Sudan. In 1985, he changed the name of the Sudanese Muslim Brotherhood to the National Islamic Front because of, the term Muslim Brotherhood was politically charged. National Islamic Front was, less so. During the late 70s and 80s, that's, when al-Turabi had ascended to this position of leadership, he convened several conferences of jihadist leaders from Hamas, from Fatah, from the Islamic Republic of Iran, from Hezbollah in the 80s. So Sudan became a center of gathering for jihadists of various kinds, Sunni and Shiite alike. Sudan was a home for Osama bin Laden for a time. One of bin Laden's wives was the niece of Hassan al-Turabi. So in June of 1989, al-Turabi was succeeded by Omar al-Bashir, a name that you perhaps know, as a man wanted for genocide. Al-Bashir was the leader of Sudan during the horrific genocides that took place in the south and around Darfur, which were programs of the Islamization of Sudan. Soon, also in the 70s, you have the emergence of the Islamic Republic of Iran in 1979. Now, I mentioned that Khomeini had studied with Muslim brothers. He was particularly devoted to Sayyid Qutb. In fact, Khomeini translated many, if not most, of Qutb's works into Farsi. Khomeini, as you know, is known for his diatribes against Israel, against the Jews, which is, another lecture unto itself. The first visit from a comrade in arms, so to say, to Khomeini right after the revolution in February 1979 was Yasser Arafat, who declared to Khomeini, the path we have chosen is identical. Right? And you can see them having a great time here. The path is identical. It's not exactly, certainly the aspiration is identical. How you get there is not necessarily identical. I mean, Arafat is not known for trying to establish Sharia law and this kind of thing, as Khomeini is. But I point this out just to suggest that, yes, there are differences in the tone and the extremity of various jihadist movements and groups, differences between Sunnis and Shiites, but there are also very deep similarities, and they see that themselves.
One of the more charming conceits of Arabic TV talk shows is that the speaker, be he a cleric or a politician, is often asked to recite a line or two of poetry or a song and uses it as an opportunity to punctuate whatever points he's trying to make during the rest of the show. And obviously in that way there is some relationship between the song and the rest of the chat. And it reflects more than my own desire to share this history with a mass audience, but also plainly the host's willingness to help me do that and to engage in a friendly discussion that serves to humanize a community that most Arab viewers have never seen except for soldiers brandishing a rifle and so on. And so in that respect, a broadcast like that is in a sense an antidote to the kind of material that is so familiar to all of you. And to the question, is it possible to roll back anti-Semitism in Arabic discourse? I argue, for reasons that you will be exposed to momentarily, that the answer is yes. And it stems from three types of opportunities that didn't exist a generation ago. And they might be referred to as top-down, bottom-up, and outside-in. Top-down, in this context, means that in the well-known alignment that has emerged with Iran, Islamists and jihadists on the one hand, and Israel and certain Sunni Arab powers on the other, there is a sense that Israel is now in a de facto camp on security issues and perhaps to some extent economic ones as well. And so that creates perhaps a new opportunity to provide a measure of political cover for these arrangements by encouraging a new discussion about Jews and Israel among Arab publics. By bottom-up, I'm referring to a rising grassroots trend, particularly among Arab youth, increasingly exposed to the culture of the global village, who, as part of a larger kind of a rebellion against the education systems they were reared in, feel that much of what they were taught about Judaism, the Jewish people, Israel, and so on, was untrue. They're more curious than ever before to learn more, and they are open and even keen to engage Israelis and Jews generally. So the possibility of encouraging that trend, empowering those young people, strengthening their hand, is another important opportunity. And finally, what I'm calling outside in refers to the fact that diaspora Jewish and Israeli elements of various sorts, some government, some outside government, are developing their own capacities to engage Arab publics in the Arabic language. And you'll be seeing some examples there. And that is a further form of mass communication that is potentially helpful in this regard. And between the top-down, the bottom-up, and the outside-in, there is now a sense of momentum in the Arab infosphere, whereby these different trends are in different ways reinforcing each other. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is that for each one of these, there's also a kind of a counter-trend, beginning on the top-down side. The same sense of Arab embattlement with respect to Iran, Shiite Islamists, and so on, is also encouraging another kind of discourse in which anti-Semitism features prominently. And to sort of illustrate that, I'm going to show you a clip from another television channel, also run by Saudis, called Wisal, which has its own way of encouraging people in the region to want to fight Iran.
يا عرب بغداد واصحوا، هل بكم رجل حكيم؟ التشيع بذرة الكافر ابن سبع اليهودي قد دفنها باب فارس انتقاما من جدودي، كبرت وقامت تسلك خبثة تتعدى الحدودي، من كلامكم ثمرها عاش في حزب الرجيم، وكيف يعطى الخمس للحاخام لاعتل زنين. يا عرب إيران تطعن طعن أعراض محمد، لو بكم رجل غيور الدم بعوقه تجمد، انهضوا والشرك ساير والله إلا أن يخمد، موعد لله ما يخلف على بيض الرقيم. يا عرب إيران تبغى ذلكم حقد الوثار، يا عرب إيران تبغى تبدي الإسلام نار، يا عرب إيران تبغى داركم دار البوار، شوفوا القتل المنظم في شوارعكم ظليم. يا عرب بغداد صارت فارسية يا نيام، شوفوا السيستاني ما يفقه عروبية الكلام.
So quite obviously, this represents a kind of a mutation of anti-Semitism, if you will, in the sense that, that the channel's desire to use every trick in the book to malign Shiites and Iran leads them quite naturally to employ anti-Semitism, feeding on the generations of brainwashing against Jews that are so strongly, that is so strongly felt in the region. I'm pleased to tell you that in 2014, the government of Saudi Arabia banned the TV channel Wisal. They evicted the studio and the broadcasters because the channel, through its programming, had incited a massacre in a Yemeni hospital, a massacre in 2 Shiite mosques in Saudi Arabia, a massacre of Shiites in Kuwait, and other acts of violence directly incited by the channel. Unfortunately, when a well-intentioned member of the Majlis Shura in Saudi Arabia, the Consultative Council, apparently out of an effort to encourage the kingdom to close down more such channels, tried to create an opinion poll on Twitter. He asked, in light of the fact that the Wisal channel incites sectarian violence and serves a factional agenda that sometimes is in tune with that of ISIS, do you support its having been closed? Just about 25,000 people responded to the poll on Twitter. 18% of them said, yes, we support the channel having been closed. 82% said no, they were opposed to the closure of the channel. So 18% is not a small number of people in a country of tens of millions, but 82% is surely a very large number of people. And that speaks to the fact that that rising trend, that encouraging trend I pointed to, remains a minority trend and is quite clearly embattled and intimidated by those who oppose it. Now, in addition to that problem, I mentioned the hope of outside-in engagement by Jews and Israelis through Arabic communications into Arab countries. It is at a very junior stage. There are attempts by, for example, American Jews to travel directly to the region and meet with heads of state. Here is Rabbi Mark Schneer, a kind of a maverick in the Jewish community, who has made the rounds of the Gulf and met with most Arab kings, as well as princes and presidents beyond the Gulf, and is widely covered in Israeli and American media, bringing the good tidings that he's met the king of Bahrain and so on. He's a wonderful guy. He loves Jews. He wants peace, etc. Alas, that message is not delivered to the Bahraini public through Bahrain's establishment media. They and Saudis and Emiratis and others who engage Rabbi Schneier and others from the Jewish community tend to not cover Jewish visits at all. And the coverage of the visits comes from opponents of these governments. So for example, here is coverage of this very visit on the Iraqi channel Al-Ahad, which has a massive audience across the Gulf. So what happens is then that whatever progress is made in high-level contacts between certain Jewish figures and heads of state in Arab countries, I don't mean to diminish that at all. I hope that it's working out very well. That is, not only is it not translating into a positive impact on the public discussion, it may even trigger a backlash. And often the Jewish groups are not even aware of the backlash, let alone in a position to respond to it in Arabic. So there's a kind of a game of pin the tail on the donkey going on here. So these are serious challenges to any prospect of positive change in top-down, bottom-up, or outside-in strategies. So as Charles mentioned, I wrote a book after working on these issues in the region for about 20 years to lay out the opportunities and the pitfalls and present a strategy to navigate them.
Hassan alBanna made it clear quite at the beginning of the establishment of the Muslim Brotherhood. The fight for what he calls the Muslim Brothers do not fight for the caliphate. Caliphate is something traditional. They fight for an Islamic Sharia state. And so many people in the West do not know that. But the Sharia state is something else than caliphate. Yeah? And the term Islamism is not an invention of Europeans or Americans, as some politically corrected idiots argue. If you read the writing of Hassan al-Banna, Hassan al-Banna says, Al-Islam huwa al-Islamiyya. Islam consists or is based on Islamism. Islamiyya, Islamism. And al-Islamiyya hiya, and Islamism is al-Islam huwa deen wa dawla, is based on the unity between state order and religious belief in Islam. And this is what Islamism is all about. It's not about terrorism. It's about the Sharia state. This is more dangerous. Yeah? But Hassan al-Banna was a demagogue, was an agitator. He was not an intellectual. There was an intellectual in the Islamist movement who, until today, is number one. His name is Sayyid Qutb. Qutb, Q-U-T-B. Sayyid al-Qutb laid down the basic understanding of Islamism, and among his booklets, he wrote only booklets about. So if I stop 5 minutes after, yeah, okay. معركتنا مع اليهود, our fight against the Jews, and he says the enmity between Islam and Jews dates back to the birth of Islam. When Islam was born, Jews start to stop its dissemination, and they failed. So left-wing people in America and in Europe argue its attitudes against Jews and Israelis in the Middle East are not anti-Semitism. It's only a reflection of the injustice done by Israel to the Palestinians. But in the year 28, there was no Israel. So why there were Islamist anti-Semitism without Israel? And when Sayyid Qutb published his book, our fight or our battle against the Jews, معركتنا مع اليهود, there was no Israel either. Yeah? So these facts belie the justification and the belittling of Islamist anti-Semitism by the left and by Western media. Yeah? And so Sayyid Qutb is very important, and at the present there's Qaradawi. Qaradawi is a very old man who lives in Qatar, so he is the heir of Sayyid Qutb and in disseminating anti-Semitism. And he is also the intellectual father of contemporary Islamism. And Islamism, represented by the Muslim Brother, is not Muslim Brothers, is not only a problem of the Middle East. It is a problem of Europe. An Italo-American scholar, his name is Giovanni Lorenzo, published a very important book by Columbia University Press, the Muslim Brother in Western Europe. And he presents, you addressed that this morning, they are very powerful in Europe, in institutions, and Europeans are in a combination, I'm sorry to say that, combination of idiotism, stupidity and naivete, support them. We said Muslim Brothers are the alternative of Al-Qaeda, because Al-Qaeda is committed to jihad violence, and the Muslim Brothers are peaceful Islamists who agree to play democratic game in institutions. That's why I call them institutional Islamists. But in my work, especially in there, I have a book, Political Islam, World Politics in Europe, completed at Cornell with the subtitle, From Jihadism to Institutional Islamism, with a question mark. I argue institutional Islamism, that means Islamists working in the institution and getting funds from the European Union, unbelievable, they are more dangerous than terrorists, because terrorists, they kill some people and they create material damage, but the effects of this terror are not lasting. But the gradual and incremental introduction of Sharia into Europe is lasting, and this is more dangerous than killing 1,000 people. Even though killing 1,000 people is bad enough, but killing a whole society is worse. I come now to the last two points. The first point, there is an argument that one should talk to Islamists to appease them. And one of the people, the most powerful person of appeasing Islamism in the West was Mr. Obama. I was so positive and so enthusiastic about him. When I wrote my book, Islam and Global Politics, I had such nice words about Obama. There's an evidence. So if I were American, I would have voted for him. But when he went to Cairo to deliver a speech ending the war, but there was no war, America with Islam, he accepted against the will of the Egyptian government that 15 leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood attend the talk, and he talked to them after that. Yeah, I made a mistake when I was talking to the earlier audience, and I will not repeat it. And first the facts, and I tell you what mistake which I done, and I will correct it now. There is a distinction. Yeah, I have 6 minutes. I can do it. To understand it, because you need the facts. I cannot suppose that you know the facts. There is a big difference between Sunnah and Shia Islam. Sunni Muslims were rulers from the beginning until today, with the exception of Iran. But Iran did not exist earlier. Sunni Muslims were not tolerant. And the schism between Sunnah and Shia Islam happened in the year 661. The schism, I'm sorry, is anything wrong?
He was worried about the sign,
Yeah.
and he wanted me to move the sign, but I was worried
Okay.
if I moved the sign, he
Okay.
would be able to see, I
Okay.
apologize.
Okay, no. So can I continue now?
No, I'm
Okay.
so sorry. I
Okay.
didn't mean to-
So the schism between Sunnah and Shia happened, and I cannot explain it because I need a full lecture for it. But just there was a schism between Sunnah and Shia Islam, 661, and the Sunni Muslims were ruling, and they were a majority, and they were killing and torturing and doing whatever they could do with the Shi'is. And this is an indication of the lack of tolerance of Islam, because the Shi'i Muslims were also Muslims, but they had different views. And religious freedom means that you accept that. But Sunni Muslims did not accept that. So the Shi'is went underground, and to protect their lives, they introduced lying as a doctrine in their religious thought. So lying, and the name of lying is taqiyya. Taqiyya means literally dissemination. Yeah? So you say in public, I'm a Sunni, but in your heart you are Shi'i and you practice Shia. And this is the major difference between Sunnah and Shia Islam. In Sunnah Islam, I grew up as a Sunni Muslim. Kutman means silence or hiding of your own idea. This is a sin in Sunni Islam. So I must say what I think. But the Sunni Islamists have learned from Iran to lie. And they introduced a new concept in Sunni Islam, which is iham. Iham, I spell it I-H-A-M, iham. Iham means cheating the unbelievers and tell them things they believe. And the politicians of the European Union and formerly President Obama were the victims of this iham, and they believed what they were telling them. Yeah? And so therefore, when you, I said dialogue with the Islamist is senseless. But I was misunderstood. I did not say one should not talk to them. Of course, we have to talk to the Islamists, but in awareness that they are lying. And sometimes you have to confront them. Yeah, you say, but this is what. Why? I mean, why are you cheating me? You tell me things which are not true. And dialogue is exchange of statements of loving one another. And I said even in television, if I need love, I go to my wife. Yeah, but I do not talk to the Islamist. Yeah, when I go to the Islamist, I negotiate. So negotiation, and this is the mistake I'm correcting. Negotiation is addressing issues. I'll give you an example from the dialogue. In a dialogue between Christian and Muslims, I participated for 20 years, from 1980 till 2000, and then I left with great frustration. You know, in Islamic theology, Christian and Jews are dhimmi. Dhimmi means believer of a second class. They are not equals. But in a dialogue, when I talk to you and I look at you as inferior person, probably if you are proud of yourself and if your self-esteem is healthy, you would not accept attributing to you a status of second class. And I said to the Christians informally, you have to put on the agenda, on the table, the issue of reforming Islam to the extent that Muslims accept Christian Jews as equals. And the Christians, you see how I should not use a word for that, yeah, but please imagine it, yeah. I have no respect, yeah. They were more worrying about that Muslims leave the dialogue than about being attributed as second-class people, yeah. And said if we ask Muslims to look at us as equals, they walk out. I said, so what? And said, so you accept being second class, yeah? And this is dialogue, yeah? And dialogue means exchange of goodwill statements. But I'm a political scientist and study international relations. If there are conflict, we sit together and we say, we identify the conflict and what are the underlying causes. And we talk about it and we try to find a solution. No taboos, hard talk. So I agree we have to talk to the Islamists because they are very powerful, yeah? Very powerful. You cannot ignore them. But do not, you know, there's the American word I like, playing games. But don't allow them to play games with you, yeah? Unless you accept to being treated as a stupid. Okay, so I conclude with this, and I think when it comes to anti-Semitism, the conclusion is when Islamists say, no, we have nothing against anti-Semitism, and one of them in an interview in Spiegel said, I am the first Jew in Europe, and he was a radical Islamist, yeah? They say we are the new Jews, yeah? So the when they say we are not anti-Semites, we are only against Zionism, and we are only criticizing Israel, and say, I'm not stupid. Thank you.
Thank you.